Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Yep, thanks. Your Excellency, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Mrs. Gemma Grozdanova, Chairperson of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Bulgarian Parliament, and on my behalf as Chairperson of the Defense Committee, I would like to welcome all of you in Bulgaria and in Sofia, and to wish you really fruitful and rewarding Inter-Parliamentary Conference for common foreign and security policy, security and defense policy. For the first day of our conference, we have distinguished guests, and I would like to introduce them. Mrs. Cveta Karajančeva, the Speaker of the Bulgarian Parliament, and Mr. David McAllister, Chairman of the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the European Parliament. And now it's my privilege to give the floor to Mrs. Karajančeva.
Mr. Chairman of the Common Affairs Committee of the European Parliament, esteemed Madam of the Foreign Policy Committee at the Bulgarian Parliament, the National Assembly, Mr. Chairman of the Defense Committee in the Defense Committee of the Bulgarian Parliament, dear participants of the Inter-Parliamentary Conference of the Common Foreign and Security Policy and Common Security and Defense Policy, welcome to Sofia on this important parliamentary forum. The European Union unites its member states, but also the citizens of United Europe as represented by the MEPs. Today, when we are confronted by the challenges of our times and are discussing the future development of the European project, national parliaments acquire a particular significance. We have chosen the motto of "United we stand strong" for our presidency. This motto can be read on the facade of the Bulgarian Parliament, the guiding principle that we have inherited from our noble forefathers, the master builders of modern Bulgaria. It was also the motto of the Bulgarian presidency of the Council of Ministers of the Council of Europe, as well as the signal we sent to the greater Europe of 47 European states. It is our clear message to all of you, representatives of the European citizens. The European project was the major peace project of the 20th century, something we'd like all European citizens to be aware of. We take pride in Bulgaria's participation in the first Congress of the Pan-European movement in 1926 in Vienna, where the Bulgarian representative, Professor Ivan Shishmanov, was elected vice president of that first European forum. The inspiration of the participants in that forum was behind the choice offered in the Manifesto for Europe to the citizen of the then conflict-ridden Europe: war or peace, chaos or order, rivalry or cooperation, collapse or advance. United Europe was born to erase the atrocities of the Second World War, when the nations opted for cooperation instead of hatred. Regrettably, while Europe was launching its unification process, my country, Bulgaria, was forcibly left out in the cold and was placed against its own will on the other side of the Iron Curtain. Bulgaria was thus deprived of any opportunity to participate in the establishment of the European institutions. One ray of hope remained, namely that even at those times, the founding fathers of United Europe confirmed our reserved place in those institutions. We, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, took our due place equal among equals. We are confident in our ability now to overcome all hardships we are facing if we face them together. We trust that the idea for European equality is shared by all Europeans. True, we keep two different viewpoints as to how, and not if, we shall bring European cooperation to its most efficient. But we are certain that dialogue, and dialogue alone, will shape our community. Before we discuss the speeds on which the European project should move, we need to reconfirm our shared vision of its direction and goals. The discussions on this most important issue need to incorporate wider strata of society to enable the European citizens feel part and parcel of this project for the future, for it will be a future for all of us to share. It is only thus that we can achieve democratic security and prosperity on our continent and defend our citizens' interests in a most efficient manner. Today, what we need is a more flexible and integrated approach marked by the enhanced relations among the EU member states to efficiently fight terrorism, offer solutions for the migrant wave issues, find cybersecurity guarantees, cooperate intensively in the field of defense. Only through united efforts shall we be able to strengthen the protection of the EU citizens. In this, the participation of national parliaments and of the European Parliament in the implementation and adaptation of the EU global strategy for common foreign and security policy is of supreme importance. I am therefore extremely pleased to welcome the participation in this Interparliamentary Forum of Madam Mogherini and her preparedness to seek and find solutions of our shared problems jointly with the MS Parliament. Active policy in support of the Western Balkan nations' efforts to become full-fledged members of the EU and NATO is a priority for the Bulgarian presidency. Our message to them is that their place in the European family is reserved, and it is their progress in meeting the membership criteria that will determine when they are going to take this place. They too form part of European unity. This is of huge importance for the whole of Europe, as well as for our region. We need no new dividing lines in Europe. What we do need are bridges in the direct and in the metaphorical sense of this word. We need connectivity of the infrastructures. We need connections among the peoples of those countries and of their young people in particular, for the future belongs to the young. This should not by any means be translated as underestimation of the communities to the countries to the east and to the south, which will remain a priority of extreme importance. In the exceedingly diverse world we live in, we need to defend and protect our European values and the interests of our citizens through adhering to and implementing of common policies. The European project confirms that unity through diversity is the successful working model. If we are united in our policies, we shall stand strong, for we know that united we stand strong. I wish you every success. Thank you for your attention.
Welcome speech, and now allow me to give the floor to Mrs. Grozdanova for her opening remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear guests, once again welcome to Sofia. I am happy to start the discussion on the future of the common foreign and security policy and the common security and defense policy in Europe. Europe is changing, and this is not news anymore. From the very beginning, the European Union has been a promise of prosperity, a belief that the interdependence will reduce tensions and will lead to economic growth. Today, we are facing a different picture. European societies are no longer satisfied with what was enough before. What we see is declining unemployment while increasing insecurity in our countries. We see rising budgets and at the same time diminishing trust in the institutions. That is why one of the most important tasks for us as parliamentarians is to understand the change of public attitudes. Economic growth and declining unemployment are no longer winning elections. They are not satisfying the Europeans anymore. Citizens are demanding something else. They want security. They understand that the situation in the world is different and the new times bring new dangers that can disrupt what we in Europe have achieved. As politicians, we need to understand and embrace this need for a Europe that protects. It is a union that knows how to guard its external borders, a union which has the division of keeping peace in its closest neighborhoods, and a union that has the resources and determination to intervene in international conflicts in order to preserve its interests. As you all understand, this requires enhanced cooperation in the field of security and defense. Not only Europe has changed, however, the whole security environment around us has changed. Some 10 years ago, the European Union was the only possible model for rapid development. Today, it is not. International terrorism has reached our streets and neighborhoods. Networks of extremists are trying to infiltrate our societies, and we are still struggling to find the right answer. Thousands of refugees and migrants are testing our physical borders and the limits of the European humanitarian potential, and we don't have a unified response. All this requires that Europeans realize the need for a major upgrade of our security cooperation. EU countries can no longer rely on someone else to take care of our own security, especially in the face of all these challenges. We need to respond with a clear commitment from all member states to improve cooperation. We have made the first step with PESCO as a midterm goal. Short-term steps may be faster exchange of intelligence, clear analysis of what we lack, and possibly finding appropriate relations with the UK after Brexit or non-EU countries. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't need to look further than our front door if we are seeking to hone our skills in foreign and defense policy. More than anywhere else, the European Union is competing for influence in the Balkans, and our policy must respond to this changed environment. The region already has problems with organized crime. It is also vulnerable to the influence of extreme religious ideologies. The countries in the Western Balkans are part of the refugee routes. That is why it is of the utmost importance for us to find the necessary instruments to make sure that these countries do not fail. There is a potential political momentum in the region to seize the opportunity and change the history of the Balkans from a source of problems to a region that could be a part of the solutions. It is of particular importance for us to ensure that all those who want to join the European Union truly share our European values, particularly when it comes to foreign and security policy. Failure to do that will make the European Union less capable of taking important decisions and will endanger its global role. Therefore, we must pay special attention to the alignment of the CFSP policy and positions by the candidate countries. We should have no illusions. The societies of the Western Balkans are pragmatic. One of the possible approaches to them is a fair and open conversation on security issues. We should state that the solution to problems such as terrorism and the management of migration flows is not in the hands of any individual country. In the case of the countries of the Western Balkans, a failure to do that could pose a real threat to the stability of the countries in the region, but also for the European Union. That is why cooperation in foreign and security policies is a desired option for both sides. I hope that during the next 2 days we will debate in more detail all these challenges. Change is the only inevitable thing in our life, Thus, we need to try to embrace it in our policies. Thank you very much, and I wish you a successful conference.
Thank you, Gemma. And now the floor will have Mr. McAllister. David, the floor is yours, please.
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it's a great pleasure to see you all today. On behalf of the European Parliament's delegation, I would also like to thank you all for being here in Sofia for 2 days of intense discussions. And indeed, as we just heard, we have an interesting and dense program. I would like to congratulate the Bulgarian presidency on the efficient organization of this conference in Sofia, and I would like to thank our hosts for the warm welcome. In particular, I would like to express my gratitude to Ms. Gemma Grosdanova, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and also General Popov, as chairman of the Defense Committee, for the good cooperation in the preparation of this conference. You did an excellent job, and I know that this is all very hard work. Since we're just about to congratulate people, I would like to congratulate the Lithuanian delegation. Where are the Lithuanians? They're over there. Colleagues, you might know, today, 100 years ago, Lithuania gained its independence. We would like to congratulate you to 100 years and good luck for the further future. Now, I'm very happy to see that we will discuss so many topics related to this region and its impact on European security. It's always important to look at these issues from a regional perspective and learn from regional cooperation success stories. At our last meeting a few months ago in Tallinn, we mostly focused on the European Union's immediate neighborhood. This weekend, we will prioritize wider global issues whilst also addressing the Western Balkans, the Black Sea region, and current developments in security and defense. Colleagues, I guess we all agree it took the European continent too long, far too long to start learning from own mistakes, so let's not repeat them again. We therefore need a coherent and holistic internal, neighborhood, and foreign policy approach. Our neighbors face exactly the same challenges and threats as we do: migration flows, foreign interference, disinformation, propaganda. We can only tackle them together. Step by step, I believe we must firmly embed the Western Balkans into the fabric of EU processes and structures, be it through cooperation with EU agencies, participation in EU's policies and programs, or the involvement into the EU CSDP missions and operations. In this regard, and I now have the pleasure of welcoming our High Representative and Vice President of the European Commission, Federica Mogherini. In this regard, I welcome the ideas spelled out in the new Western Balkan strategy you and Johannes Hahn presented on the 6th of February, 10 days ago, in the European Parliament after the Commission had adopted the policy paper. I also welcome the action-oriented Bulgarian focus on the Western Balkans, which I'm sure will be further pursued by our Austrian and Romanian friends. Bulgaria itself, I believe, is a case of a positive EU-supported transformation, and it is leading by example on the good neighborly relations, as a recent ratification of the friendship agreement with the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia demonstrates. This great country, Bulgaria, which joined our EU 11 years ago and continues its profound transformation triggered by the EU membership, is well placed to make 2018 a year of breakthroughs, ushering irreversible positive changes in the enlargement countries. EU membership, of course, is not an end in itself. It is a path towards peaceful, democratic, open, and prosperous societies. Colleagues, a final remark. We all know the parliamentary dimension is an essential component of the accession process, not least because parliamentary consent is required for such fundamental decisions as the enlargement. Let me assure you of the European Parliament's continued support in your engagement with Southeast Europe. Let's do everything in our hands to ensure we enlarge the circle of effective democracies and not defective democracies. And since Federica Mogherini has just arrived, I would also of course, like us to reflect upon our role as a global actor and about our responsibility that results from this aspiration, but also about the nature of our multipolar world and about the rules that shape the global order today. I believe the ongoing shift in the global balance of powers requires the 28 EU member states to act more as a collective on the world stage. The multilateral system can no longer rely on top-down solutions for global problems. Without further ado, I would now very much like to then give the floor to Federica Mogherini. I look forward to all the other debates we are about to hold during this conference. I take this opportunity to reiterate the importance for us as parliamentarians to actively engage in the debate on our common European foreign security policies, both at an EU and at our national levels. Thank you very much once again to the Bulgarian hosts. I wish us all an excellent conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair McAllister.
It is my honor to welcome the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission, Madam Federica Mogherini. Welcome. And dear colleagues, we shall directly proceed with the first session of the meeting, which will be dedicated on the priorities and strategies of the European Union in the area of CFSP and CSDP. Federica, I give you the floor because I know that your schedule is shortened. Please.
Thank you very much, Zema, Sveta. Thank you all, David, for this opportunity we have to exchange views on our common work on the European Union common foreign and security policy and common security and defense policy. I think this is the 7th or the 8th opportunity I have to exchange with this format that for me is extremely valuable. And actually last time we met, I think it was just 5 months ago in Tallinn. I would like to first and foremost thank our Bulgarian friends, and it's good from time to time to have a gender balance problem on the other side, for the wonderful hospitality that Bulgaria has shown in this beginning of presidency, but also for the political leadership shown on some of the files you've put on top of your agenda for this presidency. And I will come to this, to some of these issues in a moment. First of all, I would like to stress one thing that David just mentioned, the parliamentary dimension of our work on foreign policy, security policy and defense. I'm afraid I repeat this every time we meet, but it's probably because I've been a member of a national parliament myself, serving both Defense Committee and Foreign Affairs Committee in the Italian Parliament for 7 years, that I know how much of a contribution, for good and for bad, national parliaments can give to shaping our European common policy in these fields. And how your role is essential, not only in terms of shaping our common policy, but also in terms of guaranteeing that there is an open link, an open channel with the public opinions. This is true for national parliaments, this is true for the European Parliament, with which the exchange is happening on a monthly basis and even more often on some occasions. But this is really an added value that we have and that we need to use in the most fruitful manner. For me, it is crystal clear foreign and security policy is not just for governments. It's not just for the Council, it's for parliaments also. And this is clear when we ratify agreements, this is clear when we talk about how much of the national budgets are dedicated to one policy or the other. This is clear also when we take our orientations on our European policies. So let me use this opportunity to very openly and frankly and informally, if you allow me, share with you some of the progress we've made, some of the developments we've seen in the last months on our policies, and also take this opportunity to debrief you on the foreign ministers' meeting that just concluded its work 1 hour and a half ago, and where, as usual, David took part. First, I would like to update you on the work we've done on security and defense. This was only partially an issue for our foreign ministers meeting today and yesterday here in Sofia, but we discussed security cooperation with our candidate countries' partners. But I remember very well when we met, most of you, some of you, 5 months ago in Tallinn. Still work is ongoing, and still there were many, and maybe some of you also expressing doubts that we could have actually managed to achieve significant results in the field of European security and defense. And I think that in these last 5-6 months, we've managed to achieve in the field of European defense incredible results that now give us the responsibility to move forward and implement the measures we have decided to put in place. First of all, why? I think this is extremely important to clarify two things. One is that if you put together defense budgets across the European Union, you have the second defense superpower in the world. But then if you look at how we spend the money, you see that around 80% of defense investment in Europe is still spent nationally. And here is the problem we have, here is the gap we have to face. It has been estimated that pooling procurement could allow for 30% reduction of costs in equipment programs. And this is exactly the kind of work the European Union can be useful at doing, where national governments, national parliaments do not, by definition, get, which is even in the field of defense, even in the field of defense procurement, even in the field of industry of defense, pulling resources together and building European cooperations. So, as you know, we have established 25 member states have launched in December the permanent structure cooperation in the field of defense. That was for me probably the most exciting moment in my mandate so far, but I'm sure that the Western Balkans could give us also good exciting moments in the coming 5-6 months. But for sure, that was a moment when we saw that this was becoming real. The commitments the 25 member states have taken are legally binding and are real. Together with and 25 member states is a significant number of member states, more than significant, that give us a good coverage of the entire union without creating, let's say, the perceived risk that was there in the previous months of having divergences or divisions or two-speed Europe. I think we managed to move on together and with a very concrete framework of action. Together with the launching of the permanent structure cooperation, the member states adopted the first 17 projects that are now being subject to implementation. That will be the key purpose of this year. They will aim at facilitating cooperation between our armed forces, fill some crucial gaps in our capabilities, and, as I was mentioning, making our defense spending much more efficient. I'm afraid I mentioned these numbers already last year when we were at the beginning somehow of this process. If you look at the European investments in defense, we invest more or less 50% of what the United States invest, but the output of our investments produces 15% of what the American investments produces. And this is the gap on which we are aiming at working. The permanent structural cooperation is not the only big step forward we've taken on European defense. We've also launched 2 other new instruments that, together with the permanent structure cooperation and their projects, will help us building for real the European Union security and defense. One is the coordinated annual review of defense budgets. What could be defined to facilitate the understanding of the mechanism as a European semester of defense. Member states will have the opportunity through this to compare their spending plans, to identify shortfalls, and also to identify new possibilities for cooperation. So basically, we will coordinate on a voluntary basis annual reviews of defense budgets. And this exercise will also benefit NATO, because this will avoid duplications and inefficiency, in particular on spending on capabilities among those member states that are also NATO allies. And I had the pleasure to discuss this with the NATO defense ministers just on Wednesday night in Brussels. The third new tool is the European Defence Fund, where for the first time ever in European Union history, the European Commission worked at an instrument to support and mobilize resources also for supporting the European defense. And this fund will incentivize joint investments by member states and joint research. This and by the way, can also incentivize projects approved within the framework of the permanent structured cooperation. So these three tools together are designed to support each other, can be mutually beneficial to each other, and I believe constitute really the taking shape of the European Union of Security and Defense. So what last year, 1 year ago, 5 months ago, was, let's say, a wish, a plan, a project, a perspective, I would say that today is consolidated decisions taken and already in the implementation phase, well on track. All of this, and I would like to stress this because I know that for some of you this is essential, all of this in the moment when we have increased and deepened relations and cooperation with NATO as never before in the European Union history. I think the two things are not happening by chance, one next to the other, but this is exactly to show that the two things are compatible, are serving, let's say, each other in the respect of the differences of the two organizations. I will never stop saying the European Union is not a military alliance, will never become a military alliance. This is not the purpose, as we are not aiming at militarizing the European Union nor its budget. But there are things that the European Union can help doing in the field of taking responsibility as Europeans for our collective security. This sets the good basis for us to continue this work. This is not just recognizing that we collectively managed to achieve a result that is remarkable indeed, but this is just the beginning. On one side, we will have the implementation of all these decisions to be carried out. And on many of these steps, national parliaments, in particular defense committees, but also the plenaries, will have a role to play. But also, I believe, we can have new steps, new measures that we can take. I suggested last December 6 ideas on the way forward, and we're now working to turn some of them into practice. And I would just mention 3 of them. First of all, an issue that in this format we've discussed several times, the battle groups. Our battle groups have not yet been deployed. The work so is not finalized yet. I would stress the fact that the battle groups exist already has brought added value, but we could work in this coming months to deploy a battle group, and I expect progress in the Athena Committee already in these months. Not for the sake of deploying a battle group, but because we see that there are many theaters where they could make a difference for the sake of peace and security in the world, which means also for our own safety and security. Second, more responsibility comes with the need for better financing options. I have suggested to create a new European peace facility, financed and managed together with our member states, that would be off budget, but created in the context of the next multi-annual financial framework. I'm sure that with colleagues in the European Parliament, we'll come back to these discussions often together in the coming weeks. This will allow to be much more efficient in planning, predictability of the funding we have, which is a recurrent problem we are facing, and also in planning and deploying our military missions, but also to support our partners in dealing with our shared security challenges. Third, and I would close here for what concerns defense, I would like to see progress on our civilian missions and capabilities as well. Because the real added value we have is the wise mix of civilian and military instruments. This is the unique feature of the European Union when it comes to security and defense. And the security threats we're facing today require more and more this mix of hard and soft power. We are probably the only ones in the world that can use different kind of tools, from development to humanitarian to rule of law support, governance, security sector reform, different kind of engagement, making our civilian engagement even more effective is going to become essential in this coming years. So I would like now to see the same progress we've made on the military side of our work in this last year on the civilian missions and capabilities too. And if you think of the work we do, for instance, in the Balkans or in the east of Europe with our civilian missions, or the work we're doing in Iraq. I was just in Kuwait at the beginning of the week. We have deployed in December our last mission, the one, not last, the latest mission to support the security sector reform and stabilization in Iraq. You see how much of an added value our civilian work implies. So this angle of reinforcing our civilian work, I think, needs now to become at the center of our work. I would end on defense with one consideration. A personal view. This field of defense is where, in this last year, we have relaunched the European Union integration process. And I remember very well in Rome, at the anniversaries of the 60th anniversary of the Treaties of Rome, heads of state and government clearly indicated that the field of defense for the European Union was one of the fields where the relaunch of the Union was needed, and we did it. Let me tell you, I strongly believe that this should not be the only field where our Union manages to be relaunched. I believe that this can show us the way of the fact that when we want and we invest political will and commitments, joining forces across different institutions, the Parliament, the Commission, the Council, we managed to deliver, and I think that now the Union should be able to relaunch its integration process also in other fields, being it solidarity, being it economy or monetary fields, or others. This is a wish, that's a political wish that goes beyond my institutional responsibilities and my portfolio, but I think we have set the way, showing that indeed it is possible to do things that even 5 months ago were considered to be difficult to achieve. Let me move to now more the foreign policy issues. I would shortly brief you on the 3 issues that were on the agenda of the foreign ministers yesterday and today. I would start from Syria, where we have exchanged at length with the ministers on the recent developments that have been clearly quite negative and worrying. We have seen in the recent weeks that the war in Syria is far from over, even if the media attention is moving away. We have seen de-escalation areas turning actually into escalation areas, and we're seeing humanitarian situation on the ground seriously deteriorating by the day. We have always been, and we continue to be, convinced that there is no alternative to the UN-led political process in Geneva. We've been insisting in the last months with our interlocutors that all efforts have to lead to a strengthening of the UN-led Geneva track, bringing the Syrian parties around the table for direct negotiations. All initiatives should serve this objective and the objectives and methodology of the UN Security Council Resolution 2254, bringing parties to the negotiating table. We have seen clearly that the opposition is ready. We've worked a lot with the opposition to prepare it, to support it, and this is a daily work we're doing in Geneva, but also in Brussels. I will see again the delegation of the opposition on Monday in Brussels. The regime is still clearly not engaging in direct talks, and here the work we can do diplomatically is to pressure those that have a leverage on the regime, and namely Russia and Iran, to deliver on their readiness to engage in direct talks in Geneva. In words, this is relatively easy to agree. In practice, we see that there is a lot of work to be done. We have started to prepare with the ministers the second Brussels conference on Syria. This political track will be essential in the conference. As last year, we aim at gathering, well, last year it was 70 international delegations at ministerial level gathered to support the UN process. We will also focus on the humanitarian front, tracking the implementation of the pledges that were done last year, but also mobilizing new pledges and continuing to show solidarity in concrete terms with those countries in the region that are hosting Syrians, namely Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey. And we will continue to be the major contributor to our humanitarian support for Syrians also inside Syria. Coming to the Western Balkans, this was the main, one of the main elements of discussion with the ministers. I fully subscribe to what David just mentioned, and there is a good window now of opportunity for showing a credible, realistic window of opportunities for the European Union integration path of the entire region. I see a clear understanding with the leadership of the Bulgarian presidency on the fact that this is a strategic interest of the European Union, not only of the region, and I believe that we can achieve in the coming months good results on this field. Last but not least, we discussed with the ministers the situation in the Korean Peninsula. As you know, we have developed a very strong sanctions regime vis-à-vis North Korea. We are keeping this pressure at the maximum level. We have also conducted démarches on third countries to have, from their side, full implementation of the UN Security Council resolutions. We have also, as European Union, adopted autonomous measures. We just adopted recently a number of new individuals to our list for asset freeze and travel restrictions. But at the same time, we are also ready to work with the Republic of Korea, with South Korea, as we have seen in the recent days, in the occasion of the Olympic Games, some encouraging signal. We know well that this should not turn our perceptions into over-optimistic ones. We know very well that the real element will be after the end of the Olympic Games to see if DPRK will engage in meaningful negotiations on the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And we have decided to invite the Foreign Minister of Seoul to join us in one of the next meetings of the ministers to discuss together how we can also support the diplomatic track, because pressure is always aimed at pushing the interlocutors to negotiations and finding a peaceful resolution to this extremely worrying crisis. I'll stop here. I've been even too long. I apologize for that, but it has been very intense days, and I thought it was a good opportunity for you, as always, to get a picture of where we stand in the Council. And obviously, I remain at your disposal for questions that cover this, our issues or others, provided I have the answers, but I'll try to do my best. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Federica. Due to your shortened schedule, I understood that you take only one group of questions, and you should leave about 15 past 3. Okay. So, colleagues, You know that when requesting the floor, please use the colored cards, and the floor will be given to the delegates in order in which the requests are submitted, and the speaking time will be 90 seconds, a minute and a half. Please be brief in order more people to take the floor when Mrs. Mogherini is here. The first speaker is Mr. Perez from Spain, please.
Muchas gracias, señora Mogherini. Yo creo que ha sido muy brillante su intervención. Yo quisiera incidir en un aspecto muy importante, como es el reforzamiento de la vertiente civil de la política.
За много интересни неща.
Karayancheva ha manifestado que los ciudadanos europeos se sientan solidarios con la política de defensa. Pero es bien cierto que también de Europa se habla de la importancia del reforzamiento de esta vertiente civil de la defensa. Pero hay una cosa bien cierta, y es que han hablado de incremento de presupuestos, y a una parte de la sociedad europea, cuando se le menciona la palabra seguridad y defensa, suscitan imágenes negativas de uniformes, de armas y equipo militar. E incluso cuando ahora se habla también.
Now I can say that when we are negotiating for more contributions to defense budget, at least one part of our society should be opposed to it. Let me tell you, Mrs. Mogherini, how are you going to act during the next few months when you face such a situation in which you have to find the support to increase the civil participation in defense? Thank you.
Madam Mogherini, I was very much looking forward to hearing from you to learn what the EU is thinking about some of the pressing issues in our foreign and security policy. This year seemed to be a moment of truth for the European Union, a moment of reform, a moment of ambition, Juncker's ambition, Macron's ambition, reform's ambition, and instead we seem to be stuck in a year of waiting for Merkel to have a government, waiting for the Brexit to materialize, waiting for the elections now of 2019, but certainly not everybody is waiting. We have seen an American president that basically has ended unilaterally the peace process in the Middle East. I would want to know your opinion about it. We have seen Turkey's attack on those who were supposed to be our allies in the fight against ISIS. This would look like a great opportunity for the European Union to raise its voice and stand for international law and dialogue and solutions to these conflicts. Instead, we seem to be stuck yet again in a position of waiting for no one knows exactly what. Now we are talking about enlargement or integration, and I would want to ask about enlargement of what? What is the prospect? What is the horizon? There are millions of people in Europe who are still living through worsening living conditions and don't have a clear answer, a clear idea of what the horizon, what the project, what the orientation of this European Union is going to be. There seems to be no clear answer in sight. I would like to ask you for your comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The third speaker is Mr. Puidokos, Lithuania, please.
Dear colleagues, first of all, thank you for your congratulations on 100th anniversary of restoration of Lithuanian state. Feeling extremely happy being among friends. Lithuanian position on CFSP and CSDP is based on implementation of the EU global strategy, particularly in security and defense. It should reinforce the unity of the EU. I would like particularly to address more on the topic of EU-NATO relationship and its development in the context of CFSP and CSDP. Lithuania welcomes increasing cooperation between the EU and NATO, and both organizations are in possession of unique set of tools which are necessary to tackle multidimensional challenges such as hybrid threats or instability in our neighborhood. Complementarity and cooperation between the two organizations, as well as transatlantic solidarity, is the way to enhance our security. A stronger EU and a stronger NATO are mutually reinforcing. Lithuania reconfirms its full support to the joint EU-NATO declaration and its implementation proposals, including the new set of proposals endorsed in December 2017. We also support further strengthening of EU-NATO cooperation, in particular in the fields of military mobility, infrastructure development, countering hybrid threats, strategic communication, cyber security, and strengthening of defense capabilities in complementarity with NATO. And of course, the essential thing, we must avoid EU-NATO duplication and make sure both organizations can complement and strengthen each other.
Thank you very much. And next question comes from European Parliament, Mr. Takis Hadjigeorgiou.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm here. There is, you know, a great tension right now within the exclusive economic zone. Sorry, it's not my problem. Huh? So I have to start again. There is a great tension right now in the exclusive economic zone of Cyprus. I know, Mrs. Mogherini, that in that kind of conferences, nobody can give crystal clear answers. But I urge you to do so right now. Turkey, as you very well know, hindered Eni's oil company drilling machine to reach the designated spot. I know that the response to that is that Cyprus Republic has to share in the benefits of its natural gas resources in a just way between the two communities. And I fully agree, and we fully agree. This is something, though, we can do through the solution. And here is the problem. I think, I'm fully sure that Turkey may want a solution. May they want to leave Cyprus by remaining, or they want to solve the problem by remaining whilst they say that they leave. This is the essence of the problem, and we need crystal answers from the European Union. And unfortunately, I think that the response till now were somehow weak. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question is from Portugal. Mr. Medeiros, please.
Okay, thank you. The new cooperation framework created by PESCO should be regarded on the basis of the principle of complementarity to NATO. Having a stronger European defense means having a stronger NATO. There are many security challenges arising both inside Europe and around Europe neighborhood. Some of those challenges are serious threats that must be considered top priorities, such as cyber attacks and terrorism. Today, we are not yet ready to face this threat. There is a long way to go. That is why Europe must be aware and prepared to jointly respond in the most effective way. We should also keep in mind that defense will be one of the new priorities that the European institutions are discussing, to be included in the multi-annual financial framework after 2020. Also, we consider that traditional areas, agriculture and cohesion funds, should not be abandoned. We acknowledge the relevance and pertinence of creating new funds allocated to projects that will support the development and the integration of European defense industries. In this context, parliaments must have a major role, and they shall not only provide the necessary budget means, but also scrutinize the execution of the security and defense projects. So far, we can easily show achievements in several CSDP missions and operations like Atalanta in the coast of Somalia, Sophia in the Mediterranean, or in the Central African Republic, commanded by Portugal since the beginning of this year. We can also be proud in having achieved PESCO. The question is, given the concerns about security, especially cybersecurity and cyber defense, what concrete actions are being taken in this field? Thank you.
Thank you too. There will be 5 more questions. The next question is from France, Mrs. Otbon van Dorm, please.
Thank you. En préalable, je tiens à remercier la haute représentante Federica Mogherini pour son intervention ainsi que la présidence bulgare pour cette excellente organisation. La France se félicite que l'Union européenne ait fait de la défense et de la sécurité.
For this excellent organization, France is happy to see that Europe considers security and defense a priority. All the European citizens whom we represent were, back in 2016, influenced by the suggestion for European Pact for Security. We were co-organizers of the first initiatives in the field launched by the member countries, but we believe that other member states also should play their role. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Question is from Latvia, Mr. Kauniņš, please.
Yes, thank you. It's good to see you again, Madam President. One country that the EU deals with on all the foreign policy issues that you've talked about is the United States of America. And yet we've gotten a lot of mixed signals over the last year about their policies concerning Syria, the Balkans, and so on. Could you briefly characterize what the relationship is, or at least that you've encountered in the last year, in working with this new administration in Washington on trying to work together with the EU on resolving these issues? Is it positive, negative, or still up in the air? Thank you.
Thank you. And next question goes to Mr. Victor Bostinaru.
Благодаря. Аз съм.
Thank you. In Bulgarian.
Host. Нашите български приятели.
Our Bulgarian friends and hosts, I wish to thank our Bulgarian friends and hosts for this conference. English again.
And I will speak mostly as someone born here and having my roots here. First, welcoming the decision and the courage and the vision of the Bulgarian presidency to put the enlargement towards the Western Balkans very high on the agenda, contrary to the 2014 forecast, this is a big news, but it's not enough. The European Parliament decided, and throughout a joint work, EPP and SND, or both, or SND and EPP, we decided to call on the Commission to work for the alignment of the foreign policy, security and defense of the countries in the region with the EU. Is the European Commission now ready to assess this process in the earliest possible stage? Because it's important to do so, knowing that foreign other global regional actors are already in the region. And the second, looking to the map of the Western Balkans, we have 2025 target. We have 2 countries in negotiations. Can the European Commission and the Council work with the Parliament to guarantee the other 2, Albania and Fyrom, will start as soon as possible the negotiation talks, knowing that both countries deserve that they do have a major positive role on the whole region. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. And next one, Mr. Jules Perniot.
Oui, Madame la haute représentante, Monsieur le Président, Madame la Présidente, chers collègues, 3 points que je souhaiterais aborder dans mon intervention. Nous avons fait...
Madam Chairman, dear colleagues, I've got 3 questions. The first is security and defense. Concerning these 2 particular issues, last year we launched a policy, we stepped on a path which is still at a very early stage. how can we build common European defense? How can we work on a common strategic culture when we have not yet really started this process? So last year, a number of member countries did not work on the same wavelength, especially as far as the French initiatives were concerned in Mali or in Northern Africa. So yes, we have covered some way, but this is a long way. I wish to know what are your impressions for this process. What are your impressions from Emmanuel Macron's speech of the 26th of September in the Sorbonne? He then said that he wants to set up an institution for joint investigation. My second question is security, migration. These are two spheres which present us with very difficult problems. Migration policy is of major importance. What kinds of steps do you think should be taken or introduced, let it put this way, concerning issues that have not even been touched upon yet? We also spoke of the European Union taking the initiative for solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and now I hear no mention of this conflict in your presentation. I believe that this is the conflict that forms the foundation of most of the recent conflicts. Thank you.
Mr. Corsini, please.
Bonjour Federica, je suis très heureux de te rencontrer.
Good morning, Frederic. I believe that it's a great pleasure to see you again. We had some shared experience in the European Parliament. I believe that the multilateral connections are of an extreme importance, and you will agree, but I so believe that Turkey should also be included in these multilateral relations. Why? Because it makes us face fundamental issues concerning the present-day tension in the Mediterranean region. Turkey starts a policy which ought to have helped break the Islamic coalition in Syria, and yet it does not. What is your personal position on this? Thank you very much for your answer.
C'est aussi mon plaisir de retrouver ici toi comme beaucoup d'amis.
Well, with you and with a number of other friends here in this place in the Parliamentary Assembly as well as in Italy. I started in French. I shall continue going in French in answering the question of my French colleagues.
L'Allemagne, l'Espagne et l'Italie pour
Yes, France really had a defining importance jointly with Italy in creating a nucleus of member states in respect of European defense. I would like to underline a fact. I apologize. Maybe I will have to say it in English because I'm not sure I'll be able to find the words in French. The 4 women ministers of defense in the European Union have really undertaken this task, and I believe this is very interesting as a development and as a perspective as in the field of European defense, this combination of ambitious approaches and the full utilization of all tools at our disposal is combined into an excellent approach for collaboration within PESCO. Without, of course, there is some old dynamics which we should get rid of, and we should focus on vaster horizons towards goals which cannot be implemented overnight. The correct word is approach, and I believe that with France, but also with other states, from these 25 states I mentioned in my speech, because for those states which are outside these 25, maybe they have their own reasons, but I still believe on their support and commitment of all member states to continue these giant steps forward, because there are many things which need to be connected in a nexus for developing a comprehensive culture related to our strategic goals, not only in the area of defense, but also in development. Israel, which was a strategic goal for France. Next week in Brussels, there will be a conference, a summit, a high-level conference of GPET and Sahel states and partners, global partners from all over the world who will come to Brussels to discuss what is happening in the Sahel or Sahel states. So this is a leadership approach in our common work amongst the European institutions. With our partners, one of our partners, the Sahel countries or Sahel countries, and the synergy, we want to introduce on migration policies. I'll say just a few words, otherwise it will take a lot of time. I'm extremely pleased with our work which we have carried out so far, the external actions. I know that there are divisions in our European policies in respect of the refugees and providing asylums to them. But with Europe, Africa, and some Asian partners, we concluded real contracts, agreements for joint initiatives to combat the traffickers of migrants who organize gangs and bring large groups of immigrants who want to get to Europe in the hope of finding work on our continent. These are the steps which I believe we had to undertake, and we undertook. So in this aspect of our migration policy, the unity of the member states and the institutions is an actual fact, and I'm extremely pleased to say that.
I would say that on one side, we face one challenge. That is, well, you used the expression up in the air. I think that we are facing a situation in Washington that is somehow a little bit unprecedented compared to the US recent history. And I have had the chance of publicly saying there was a time when in Washington people were asking themselves, what is the telephone number of Europe? Sometimes we have the feeling that we wonder what is the telephone number of the United States today. Not that they don't have any, they have many. But having said that, I have to say that cooperation with the United States is in 90% of the files and of the cases on foreign and security policy good. We work together. We work together as we develop our European defense, NATO. I had excellent exchanges with Secretary Mattis just the day before yesterday on this. We work together when it comes to Syria. We work together when it comes to DPRK. We work together when it comes to several other hotspots or Ukraine. So many files on which the work we do is purely 100% common work. Western Balkans, typical example, and so many others. So 90% of the cases, even more probably, our cooperation is as good as it has ever been. And in some cases, even better. There are some issues, though, and here I answer to one of the first questions coming from one of the Spanish colleagues. There are some questions where our policies are different. Not that our policies have changed, but simply that the change in the administration in Washington has changed the US consolidated position. You mentioned the Middle East peace process. This is a clear example where the European Union had no, let's say, was not shy to say that for us, the decision to move the embassy to Jerusalem was not the right decision to take, and where we took a more visible role, in particular in coordinating with our partners in the Arab League, to express and consolidate the international consensus on the basis of the Middle East peace process. And we took initiatives. We invited Prime Minister Netanyahu in Brussels. He came after 22 years of lack of visit from the Prime Minister of Israel to the European Union institutions. He came in December to meet the 28 foreign ministers of the member states. The following month, we did the same with President Abbas, and the next Foreign Affairs Council we'll have in 10 days from now, will invite the 6 foreign ministers of the Arab League that have created the group that for the Arab League works on the Middle East peace process, to reaffirm that for us there's only a two-state solution perspective, and that Jerusalem for us will be the capital, shared capital of the two states. This is one example where we made our voice very clear, very easily understandable, and a point of reference for many in the world that we're looking at partners. We're looking for partners with which they could reaffirm the international consensus. Another issue where we clearly made our position very clear, that you didn't mention, but I would just name it, is the need for us to preserve the nuclear deal with Iran. The European position was clear, continues to be clear, and constitutes a point of reference for all those in the world that believe that multilateral agreements on nuclear non-proliferation have a value in itself in terms of security. So the picture is positive, with some exceptions, where we, without any problem, face the differences we have, look for common positions or for overcoming complications or difficulties we might have, or divergences we might have, in a spirit of good friendship. That stays, and I think that that is solid. That goes beyond any change in administration we could face on their side or on our side. We are 28, so we change governments and administrations depending on the internal procedures of every country, but every certain number of months, taking into consideration all the 28 member states. EU-NATO cooperation is a pillar of our work on defense. We have now, if I'm not wrong, 74 projects that we are implementing. And the NATO summit next 11th and 12th of July in Brussels will be the opportunity for us to take stock of the implementation of the Warsaw Summit Declaration, but also of the implementation of all these projects we have launched. Some of them are key on the issue of cybersecurity that some of you mentioned. This is a field, together with hybrid threats, where our cooperation with NATO is extremely valuable. We've also inaugurated with Stoltenberg together the European Center of Excellence on countering hybrid threats in Helsinki. That was, I think, showcasing an excellent level of common work between the European Union and NATO. And let me take the opportunity also to join my voice to those that have wished a happy 100 years anniversary to Lithuania these days. On Cyprus, you're right. Words need to be clear, actions need to be clear. Not necessarily settings like this, which are very much public, are the most appropriate places where messages can be made very clear. But as you know me well, I'm always ready to have more intimate discussions, let's say, about our challenges. Let me say two things. You're perfectly right. There are two levels that we need to address. And we need to address them from a European perspective, because Cyprus is a member state of the European Union and solidarity is the basis of our work. The immediate one, what is happening now in these days, and our Italian colleague Paolo mentioned that already. there has been, and we're seeing this not only on Cyprus but also in Greece, there has been an increase of tensions that is completely unacceptable. And there we made it very clear in our bilateral meetings and publicly that we expect Turkey to avoid any action, not only any rhetoric, but any action that can provoke an attempt to any or provocation or a violation of sovereignty of any of our member states. We're very clear on this. There's a second element that we need to look at, which is the settlement of the Cyprus issue. And I believe it is going to be essential in the coming months to find a way, together with the United Nations, to relaunch talks for the solution, for the settlement of the Cyprus issue. This doesn't put the first element, what is needed now, in a second place, on the contrary, but this shows how urgent it is that we seriously work on a real solution of the Cyprus issue that will have to be real, that will have to be satisfactory. And we don't have probably time and space enough here to tackle this, but these are issues that we constantly discuss with our Turkish friends. On the Western Balkans, and I probably conclude on this. No, there was another question on Afrin that I would not like to skip. I think we were very clear, both myself and many ministers of the EU member states. We are extremely concerned about the military intervention that Turkey started in Afrin. We understand the security concerns of Turkey. We not only recognize the right, but even the duty of the Turkish authorities to protect their citizens and to guarantee their citizens' security, all of them. But we insist on the fact that military activities have to be targeted against Daesh and UN-listed terrorist organizations. This is the criteria we follow in the European Union, and this is also, by the way, where we stand together with our American friends. And I think Tillerson yesterday used words that were very clear in calling for restraint from the Turkish side in this military activity. I would add that part of the escalation that we're seeing today, and that today in these days, and that worries us, is also related to this. So I think we were very clear in this respect, both in our direct contacts and also publicly. Again, recognizing that Turkey is living since now several years, a very complicated moment with a terrorist threat and bordering with a long border, a country at war, which is a situation that I would not wish to any of our members or partners or candidate countries or friends. So we recognize the specificity of the situation, of the security situation that Turkey is facing, but we believe that some actions might be even counterproductive, exactly in view of guaranteeing security to their citizens. On the Western Balkans, the enlargement perspective, as you said, Victor, you raised that, yes, has been something that both the Bulgarian presidency and the European Commission have put, and the European Parliament, you contributed a lot, put clearly as a priority for this end of the mandate, in a realistic and an ambitious way together. I would like to underline two things of what you mentioned. One is alignment on foreign and security policy is extremely important. We discussed this with the candidate countries' foreign ministers this morning, today. David can witness that. We have in the region, among the candidate countries in general, different levels of alignment. I have to say I don't particularly like the word alignment because it's very passive. I think what we're doing actually is developing together common policies that formally are common for the European Union member states, but in practice, our dialogue with our partners in the region is so intense that we do shape our policies very much together. Two of them have 100% alignment on foreign security policy, Albania and Montenegro. Others have different levels. What counts for me is really looking at the trend. There are countries that are clearly increasing the level of alignment with our common foreign and security policy, and that, I think, is a very positive development, for instance, in Skopje. Others that are clearly decreasing their common approach to foreign policy with us, and this is a signal that they constantly get from us. It's important to share common visions on foreign policy. And on the date, 2025, it's not a target. It's not a target, it's not a deadline, it's an horizon, it's a credible perspective. That, and I want to state it very clearly, as I had the opportunity to state in the European Parliament, that is valid for the two that are currently negotiating, but also for the other two that might start negotiating in the coming months. This will be a decision that the Council will take under the Bulgarian presidency. And personally, I hope that that can happen within the Bulgarian presidency, as the Bulgarian presidency has set this framework in I think, a positive manner. Merit-based, so the decisions will need to be taken on the basis of merit, as it is the case always. But I think it is very important for us to understand that in the case of the Western Balkans, the enlargement process has a specific value that is not only the one of reuniting the continent or expanding our family, but it has also a component of the original DNA of the membership to the European Union, which is creating peace and reconciliation. The region, let's say, the countries of the Western Balkans are not just countries that want to join the Union. They're also countries that were at war among themselves till 25 years ago. And this was not the case for previous waves of enlargement processes with other member states. So we have to keep into consideration the regional angle in the case of the Western Balkans more than in other cases, because there is a component of peace and reconciliation that is part of the European Union DNA, and that in this region counts, again, as it counted with the 6 founding member states. Strangely enough, we're going back to the origins, but I think this is the added value of the work we're doing. Last, sorry, I didn't want to skip the first question. That was about the reinforcement of the civilian component of our security policy and the perception by European citizens that sometimes everything that deals with defense is negative. It is exactly because we have a European way to security that is always focused on the civilian and the military components together. It is exactly because the European Union knows that there is not one single crisis or challenge that can be solved through a purely military approach, that we need to develop the European defense and security capacity more. Because the world today needs, and the Europeans today needs, this autonomous approach to security that is the really European one, that would never, never accept to think that a military intervention can solve all problems as such. We need a defense and military component from time to time, but always in the context of a broader set of measures. And this specific European way to security is also what we've put on the center of the work we've done on defense. And also, I think, the added value that we can contribute to the international system, starting from the United Nations. Thank you. I think I covered most of the things. I apologize for the reduced time of our session, but unfortunately I had to change my travel arrangements, so I will have to leave you before. But I know you have other exciting sessions in front of you, and some of my colleagues from the European External Action Service will join you for some other sessions, more specifically on some other sectors of work. And I'm looking forward to continue our cooperation. And I thank you very much, and in particular our Bulgarian friends, for having arranged this, and for what I found a very useful and also for me very interesting exchange. And I wish you all the best for the continuation of your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Federica, for your presentation and for your participation. And we hope to see you in Vienna next time. Colleagues, I have some announcements and we'll finish the session. Just a minute, please. Dear colleagues, I will take a few minutes to inform you on the results from our meeting of the Troika Presidency and the heads of delegations. At the Troika meeting, we formally adopted a statement of the Troika Presidency, which represents the final document consisting of all the proposals and amendments submitted by the delegations. The statement is also endorsed by a FED from the European Parliament side. At the heads of delegations meeting, all representatives were made preview of the particulars and the process of forming this document. The heads of delegations gave their show of support for several new proposals, and we all reached a consensus for the document, which will be called now Statement of the Heads of Delegations, and the formal presentation of the statement will be made toward the end of the conference, tomorrow afternoon. And with this, we can conclude this session earlier. Buses are waiting for you to take you to your hotels. Our program for tonight features a guided tour of the National Museum of History. Departure from your hotels will be at 6:30. And we'll have a dinner with traditional folklore, and the buses from the museum will depart at 7:45 p.m. Thank you and have a nice afternoon.